Excellencies, friends, it is an honour to speak to you, and I hope in the future we may meet in person. Today I bring to your attention the long-term imprisonment of human rights defenders. I ask for your help and want to engage with states on the report's recommendations. Since this mandate began 2 decades ago, it has monitored numerous cases of defenders serving sentences of more than 10 years in prison or facing charges for which they could be sentenced to similarly long terms. The report I present to you today details information gathered by OHCHR and supported by other credible sources on the situation of defenders condemned or at risk of being condemned to long jail terms. Many have been sentenced under vague and ill-defined charges, often relating to treason, subversion and terrorism. In none of the cases detailed in this report was violence used, incited or condoned. Many are held in harsh conditions, suffer from ill health and are deprived of adequate medical attention. Some are also denied regular access to their families. Some are at risk of being sentenced to death, and some have died in prison after being given a long sentence following an unfair trial. The full extent of the problem is not known. Human rights defenders are serving long terms in detention on every continent, but there are very likely more cases than this mandate has been able to document. During the period from the 1st of January 2020 to the 30th of June 2021 alone, this mandate sent 28 communications to 22 member states on the long-term detention of 148 human rights defenders. Of these, 104 had been convicted and 44 were at risk of being sentenced to 10 years or more. We note that 54 were charged with crimes related to national security, 53 were charged with crimes under anti-terrorism laws, 30 with violations of both national security and anti-terrorism laws, and 11 with other crimes such as murder, robbery, extortion, kidnapping and blasphemy, among others. Some are labour leaders, others are lawyers, some are journalists. Others are targeted for peacefully advocating for democratic reform or for exposing deficiencies in governance, or for peacefully defending other rights that states have promised to safeguard. Some defenders have been jailed in reprisal for their engagement or intended engagement with United Nations mechanisms. Some states contend that those jailed are not defenders but subversives, traitors or terrorists. I know the difference, and I would remind states that my long years of experience in identifying who is a human rights defender and who is not is partly why I was entrusted with this mandate. This is an enduring problem which states need to confront once and for all. This mandate instructs me to recommend effective strategies to better protect human rights defenders. The advice is clear. If states really want to protect human rights defenders, then don't put them in prison for long terms for peacefully defending the rights of others in accordance with the Declaration on Human Rights Defenders and international standards to which you've all agreed. And in countries where human rights defenders have been deprived of their liberty for long terms, whatever legal processes have been followed, they should allow for a proper review of the proceedings through an appeal process in accordance with fair trial standards and release them, as Burundi did with Germain Mukuku, who was originally sentenced to 32 years. Many states sentence human rights defenders to long terms in prison because they want to neutralise their activities and because they can. They want to because they are unhappy with defenders exposing corruption, pointing out human rights violations, or highlighting other deficiencies in governance. And states can do this because they ignore the international treaties they have committed to, nearly always with negligible international consequences. They enable themselves to imprison human rights defenders by passing vague laws, staging sham trials, by torturing defenders into making false confessions, and by lying about the work of those peacefully advocating for the rights of others. For many years, this mandate has regularly presented to member states details of human rights defenders sentenced to long prison terms. Yet in response to my call for submission for the present report, not one member state acknowledged holding any human rights defender in long-term detention. Too many states are in denial. They can and should immediately stop this practice and abolish the mechanisms that enable it. Targeting human rights defenders with long-term jail terms destroys lives, families, and communities. States should end this unjustifiable, indefensible, and dishonourable practice immediately and forever. My report includes recommendations for states willing to advocate for the release of defenders jailed for long terms and suggests ways that can be achieved. I believe there is a responsibility on states who value international human rights norms to work for the release of those detained elsewhere. I'm eager both to talk to states who are detaining human rights defenders and to states who want to advocate for their release. Human rights defenders have indomitable spirits and show us the best of being human in their concern for the rights of others. Nowhere is this spirit more evident than in the words of Nobel Peace Laureate Liu Xiaobo, which he was not allowed to deliver at his trial in December 2009 and which led to an 11-year sentence. I have no enemies and no hatred. None of the police who monitored, arrested, or interrogated me. None of the prosecutors who indicted me, and none of the judges who judged me are my enemies. Hatred can rot away at a person's intelligence and conscience. Enemy mentality will poison the spirit of a nation, incite cruel mortal struggles, destroy a society's tolerance and humanity, and hinder a nation's progress towards freedom and democracy. That is why I hope to be able to transcend my personal experience as I look upon our nation's development and social change, to counter the regime's hostility with utmost goodwill and to dispel hatred with love. Thank you.